Hello everybody, my name is Jimmy Smith and welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel. Thanks for stopping by. This is a WSET Level 3 presentation that I have put together on the growing environment, looking at soils. This is at the final part of the growing environment chapter, looking around sort of pages 31, pages 32 of the growing environment. So this is chapter 5. So if you do have any comments, questions or concerns, please do get in touch. You can do via the comments section underneath this YouTube video, or via the social media that you see at the bottom of each slide, or via our website, winewithjimmy.com. This part 1 is going to be free content available on YouTube, and then part 2 will only be available to members of the Wine with Jimmy e-learning portal, which is a fantastic place to help you structure your revision and understanding of the WSET Level 1 through to 4. So lots of great things there. For the Level 3, of course, there are plenty more videos. We have recorded hundreds of hours worth, and you have got revision sessions, short written answer questions, you have multiple choice questions and flashcards, plenty of stuff to really help you with your preparation for the examination. Okay, so let's rock and roll with the growing environment and on soils. So this is our geological section. It is only really a very small part of the WSET Level 3 syllabus now. They have downgraded the amount you need to know about soils and geology. So it is only a real sort of small section today, but nonetheless, it's very important. And I will add in a couple of things just to make it a little bit more understandable. So soil supplies the vine with water and nutrients. Very important for the critical role of grape growing. So that means it's very, very important. And it's important to understand the difference between minerals, rocks, and soils. Because often in the wine industry, we just talk about it being a soil. But in fact, we do have 3 differentiations: minerals, rocks, and soils. Minerals are things like mica, quartz, silica, so all those kind of things which form rocks, but they are not discussed within the Level 3 syllabus. Rocks are strong masses of minerals, and we will talk about those because we'll talk about their properties, such as heat retaining properties and drainage capability. So rocks. And then we have soils, which we're about to go through as well. The definition of soils, things like the top organic layer, the humus, and things like the topsoils and bedrocks and things like that. That's what we're going to define in this section. So the next slide here is just a little bit on terroir. The terroir concept, which you may have heard of before, is quite complex. It is one word in French, but really an epic essay in English. So it's quite a complex thing. Now, generally, very directly, when people asks a winemaker, what is the terroir of this wine? They generally are asking about the soil or the location, but it's actually a lot more than that. And you'll see that in this little bit of a depiction here. So things like soil, the topography or terrain, the climate, the microclimate around that vine and vineyard, and then also human influence, the methodology behind viticulture and vinification. So it actually includes quite a lot of concepts, quite a lot indeed. So it's not just related to soils when we talk about terroir. It's inclusive of rocks, minerals, the local environment, human influence. Wild yeasts, for instance, all have different capabilities, and they would be a part of the terroir, and also things like the terroir of clay and oak, which are used for fermentation and maturation purposes. So it's a thing that's well worth thinking about. It isn't something which is going to be too important for the level 3, but it's important because you may hear your tutor talk about it. You may hear it mentioned in text. So terroir. Okay, so let's get to the stuff which is mentioned in the level 3 syllabus. And we are talking about, first of all, a definition of something called bedrock and then soil. So here is a very simple diagram, a depiction of a cross-section of some soil. And at the bottom, you have solidified, strong bedrock. So bedrock is unbroken, solid rock. And then the soils are what sit upon that. These can be anything from a few centimeters deep on top of the bedrock, sometimes not even that, and all the way up to several meters deep, depending on the location. You'll often find on steep slopes, certainly at the top of the slope, where there is a lot of erosion and surface runoff, you'll find that the soils are quite thin there. So the bedrock is very close to the surface and certainly around fault lines as well. So that's the bedrock. You'll see there are other descriptions here. So humus at the top, which is organic matter. We'll talk about that later. Something called topsoil, subsoil. Actually, this layer here, which has not been identified, is actually kind of parent soil, which has been, you can see, kind of weathered parts from the bedrock. But these can be a number of different things. This can be weathered bedrock. This could be deposits over periods of time from rivers, lakes, and oceans, sedimentary soils, for example. So bedrock, definition of bedrock on that one. And stones and rocks. So soils, as I just mentioned, that sit above the bedrock are made up of tiny particles of various sizes. Some of them are very easy to spot. Some of them are much more clumped together and very small, for example. So we have large stones and rocks, like you'll see in this picture. And also humus, organic matter, decaying leaves, decaying plants and animals, and so on. These stones, though, you'll see in this picture, often come from underlying rock, as I mentioned, or from later deposits laid on top of the rock. So that's deposits from sedimentation, things like rivers, which can be alluvial, colluvial, things like lakes and oceans and seas and so on. Okay. So stones are the largest soil particles, as you can see. They often are little pebbles, or they can be sort of hand-sized ones. You've got a few in there as well. They are not always present in vineyards because in some areas they've not been deposited or the bedrock has not been weathered. So you'll find that the sediment here, the soil, is very, very fine. It's a very light soil. But stones are important in these rocks because the more of them, there's a bit of a mass, and that mass can absorb heat quite well. The big example, of course, is what Cabernet Sauvignon needs, and Cabernet Sauvignon loves warmth. And on the left bank of Bordeaux, it's very famous for gravels. And gravels is the geological term for all of this, you know, stones and rocks that sit upon the soil. So you'll find with these wonderful gravelly soils around the Medoc, the Haut-Medoc and Grave, that it absorbs the heat, and it really maintains the heat, meaning that Cabernet Sauvignon has a longer growing season. It's able to ripen a little bit better. So stones and rocks. Then we have sand. Sand. Now, sand is the next sort of size down for your level 3 syllabus. So stones and rocks are the largest particles of soil. And then we have sand. So sand are tinier particles. It's the largest of the rest, and that's really going to only compare to clay for the level 3 syllabus. Sand drains quite easily, and it works therefore quite well in wet climates. But for very drought-ridden areas, sandy soils can be quite problematic. It is a soil that warms up and cools down quite quickly. You'll know that on a beach, for example. If you walk barefooted along a beach and the sun is shining, the sand is quite hot. As soon as the sun goes down, it becomes very cold. And that really is that kind of heat transfer with sand. But the pest phylloxera cannot exist in sand. It does not like the texture of sand, so it's not found within sandy soils. So sandy soils locations, often you will find pre-phylloxera ungrafted vines because they haven't needed to graft due to the absence of phylloxera. Okay, so this picture here is actually what's called, this is not for your syllabus, I like to give examples though. This is Lessona gold, and this is at the property Sperino, which is Isole y Elena's, who are Chianti Classico. It's their production up in the Piemonte, so it's the Di Marchi family. And this is their ancient marine sands at Lessona. They call it Lessona gold. Then we have clay. So clay is the smallest of the soils. So we have the biggest rocks and stones, then very fine particles, of which sand is bigger and clay is smaller. It's very important, clay, because it binds together quite easily and it can retain water quite easily as well. A topsoil of clay expands and contracts with water, but deep clay subsoil retains water and minerals quite well. And it can be an absolute savior to grapevines in areas which it's quite dry. However, it can also over-waterlog clay soils. So often you have to match the correct rootstocks with the vines in a waterlogged clay area. Some also say that clay soils will impart certain characters into the wine. Now, this is a bit of conjecture, but you do tend to find that clay soils, like in Pomerol, the Merlot there is quite robust and powerful, round and generous, for example. Okay, so that is clay. Then we have humus. So humus is the normally the top layer of the profile, like we mentioned, and it's made up of decomposing plant and animal materials. In this picture, you'll see nice, healthy humus, lots of bark and looks like detritus of leaves, etc., which have then formed that soil. They are very rich in plant nutrients, so it has, of course, the NPK, plenty of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and have excellent water retaining properties as well. So very healthy topsoils. And of course, you can go and buy topsoils in big department stores, gardening centers, etc. It's very easy to buy this, but of course it's important for vineyards for healthy soils to have that healthy humus at the top of it. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this first part, a slightly shorter video. Soils part 2 is actually looking at soil and heat and soil and water, and bringing that into a bit more play. I've mentioned a little bit on this one, but we'll go into a bit more detail about that. And also there will be a short written question around these concepts as well. So we'll put a bit of a question together so you can work through that with me. So as always, if you do have any comments, questions or concerns, please do get in touch via commenting below this video on YouTube or on social media. You'll see at the bottom of every slide, or by the winewithjimmy.com website. That e-learning portal, which is for members only, is going to be an absolute savior for you. Please do have a look and sign up to help you with your studies. If you do find yourself in my hometown of brilliant old Blighty's London, please do come and see me for a class, a glass or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith of Wine with Jimmy. See you very soon. Goodbye.